Welcome to our channel on the topic of fluorescence in nature, what we can see when we look differently. We'd like to take you along on this journey and introduce you to the topic of fluorescence. Fluorescence isn't a glow in the traditional sense. It's a transformation of light, in other words. Certain natural substances simply have the ability to absorb high energy, invisible light, usually ultraviolet light, and then immediately emit it again as visible light. This light emission stops immediately as soon as the UV radiation ceases. When you shine light on the plant, it glows back at a different wavelength. If you turn the light away, the glow stops immediately. So there is no storage and no afterglow. It's simply a reaction. And physically, it's like this. A photon from the UV range excites an electron in a molecule. This electron then briefly jumps to a higher energy level and immediately falls back down again. The energy released in the process is then emitted as light with a longer wavelength. It's often green, blue, red, or yellow. This loss of energy is really crucial. UV is never emitted again as UV, but always as visible light. I like to compare this to a rubber ball. If you drop a rubber ball from above in a gym, it does bounce back, but it doesn't reach the same height again. It never goes all the way back up. Some energy is lost. Many people also confuse fluorescence with bioluminescence. These are two completely different things. Fluorescence requires external light, that is UV light. The reason this doesn't happen under sunlight is simply that sunlight doesn't have enough energy. Fluorescence stops immediately when the light source is turned off. It is a purely physical conversion of light and occurs in plants, materials, fungi, resins, bones, feathers, insects, and of course it also occurs in the human body. Bioluminescence, on the other hand, is produced by a chemical reaction within an organism. Yes, there's ATP involved, so in other words, the ATP process is at work here in an organism. No external light is needed. It is actively produced by the living being itself, and it is well known from fireflies. For example, from glowworms, as well as various deep-sea creatures or even glowing fungi. This usually happens through the reaction of luciferin and the enzyme luciferase. You can take another look at how exactly this ATP process works in the cells. We have it too. And then a lot of things will become clearer to you. In short, you could say, fluorescence reacts, bioluminescence produces. Why we can't see fluorescence without UV light? So the human eye only perceives light within a very narrow spectrum. We're talking about roughly between 400 and 700 nanometers. UV light is below this range, and it's simply invisible to us. Many natural substances are constantly fluorescing, but in everyday life they are not sufficiently excited by high-energy light. Only with an additional dedicated UV light source, such as a specialized UV lamp, does the plant or natural substance truly provide exactly those specific wavelengths of light that are precisely needed to effectively excite the electrons within the various constituent substances present. You could also say that fluorescence is always present, but it remains silent until we speak the right language. It's also important to note that not all UV is the same. The wavelengths are really crucial here. UV light is not a uniform range. Especially for observing nature, two particular ranges are especially relevant. A distinction is made between UVA and UVB. UVA ranges between 315 and 400 nanometers. This is safer for nature observation and is ideal for plants, resins, and also many organic substances. It often produces a green, yellow, or even a reddish fluorescence, and it's actually the most commonly used in fieldwork. Then there's UVB, which is between 280 and 315 nanometers. This is more energetic, and you can of course trigger a much more intense fluorescence, but it is extremely harmful to the skin and also to the eyes. So in nature observation, it's actually only of limited use. Makes sense. I also think that what is harmful to us regarding the skin and the eyes naturally also causes some damage to certain natural substances. Within UVA, there are significant differences here. So for example, if I use a UVA lamp with 365 nanometers, I get a deeper, often clearer fluorescence with certain organic materials, not with all of them. You have to figure that out a bit. At 395 nanometers for many materials, the fluorescence is weaker, but it's more robust. Often there is simply a much larger proportion of residual visible light from the UV source. And which wavelength ultimately makes sense really depends directly on the material. It's a matter of finding out. Natural substances and the typical fluorescent colors, the fluorescent colors are not a coincidence, but are related to the molecular structure. Plant compounds, of course, play a very important role here. We have chlorophyll, which fluoresces deep red. It is especially visible in leaves, or you can also see it at the tips of needles. People also use it in plant physiology to efficiently measure photosynthesis. It is well documented in plant physiological studies that by visualizing chlorophyll, that is with this fluorescent tone, you can also get a sense of whether the plant is currently under stress or not. This is already being widely used in cultivation and in the agricultural sector in various countries. For example, there are coumarins, which are present in woodruff or also in citrus plants. They fluoresce blue to blue-green, and they fluoresce very strongly at 365 nanometers. They are often also aromatic ring systems, which promote fluorescence. There is a connection there. There are resins and balsams, which are often yellowish, orange, or sometimes even tend toward a green neon yellow tone. Depending on the degree of oxidation, fresh resins usually fluoresce quite differently from old, dried resin. Lignin, which is a component of wood, it shows a blue-greenish fluorescence. This is especially visible on freshly cut wood, so if you shine a UV lamp on it, you will immediately see where the resin is located. There are minerals, various stones that are very variable in how they reflect light. There are green, pink, blue, white, and especially fluorides and calcites are classic examples here. The crystal structure plays the main role here. And then of course we have fungi. Some species fluoresce greenish or bluish, so it's probably a byproduct of biochemical processes. The function of this is still not fully understood. Actually, you can say that about all natural substances or organic materials. The process of how all this happens and ultimately why the plant produces these substances in different proportions. And you also notice when you observe plants very closely that this kind of, I'll call it, the reflection of ultraviolet light varies quite significantly and dynamically. So how a particular plant is faring, what specific time of day it happens to be, whether it is the season of spring, summer, or autumn, you definitely notice differences there. Why is nature more than just an effect? Fluorescence is not just a toy of physics, but is already being used today. In ecology, for example, plant stress, as I mentioned earlier, in forensics, materials research, in medicine, tumor diagnostics as a marker substance. And of course also in environmental analysis. In nature itself, it can have various functions. Plants also use it to guide pollinators, as UV protection, as a signaling effect, or simply as a byproduct of complex molecules. So let's come to the final thought. Fluorescence doesn't show us a different world. It actually shows us the same world, but we see it with different eyes. What appears inconspicuous during the day reveals itself under UV light as a finely tuned interplay of different molecules of energy and structure. And it's not magic. Well, it feels like it when you see it for the first time, but if you observe it over a longer period, you realize that these are coordinated processes that ultimately lead to this glow. I hope you enjoyed it and got some useful information again. Feel free to follow the channel, and as always, I wish you a pleasantly fragrant day.